Question 1. Market research demonstrates a growing concern among end users regarding the privacy of their data, even within internal IT environments. Your organization is implementing IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. To gain deeper insights into application performance and system health. During a review of the monitoring agent configurations, you discover that certain agents, particularly those monitoring user-facing application, might be capturing detailed transaction logs that could inadvertently include sensitive user information, such as usernames or partial session data. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with data privacy, best practices, and mitigate potential risks? Option A. Rely solely on existing network firewalls and general system access controls to protect the monitoring data, as these are considered sufficient for safeguarding all types of data. Option B. Assume that all data collected by ITM agents is purely technical and does not constitute PII, and therefore no specific data privacy measures are required within the ITM configuration. Option C. Disable detailed transaction logging for all ITM agents to eliminate any possibility of capturing sensitive data, even if it significantly reduces the diagnostic capabilities of the monitoring system. Option D. Configure ITM agents to mask or anonymize any data fields identified as potentially containing personally identifiable information, PI, before it is stored in the Tivoli Enterprise Portal or historical databases. Correct answer is D. Configure ITM agents to mask or anonymize any data fields identified as potentially containing personally identifiable information, PI, before it is stored in the Tivoli Enterprise Portal or historical databases. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT administration, balancing the need for efficient system monitoring with the imperative to protect sensitive data. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the implications of data collection and retention policies within the context of IBM Tivoli monitoring ITM v6. 3. Specifically concerning the handling of personally identifiable information, PI, that might be inadvertently captured by monitoring agents. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and compliant strategy. It involves understanding the data collected by ITM agents, identifying potential PII, and implementing appropriate masking or anonymization techniques before data is stored or transmitted. This aligns with best practices for data privacy and security, which are increasingly governed by regulations that mandate the protection of personal information. In the context of ITM v6. 3 administration, this means configuring agents and data repositories to adhere to these principles. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential for PII collection. This failure to identify and mitigate risks associated with PII is a direct violation of data privacy principles and could lead to regulatory penalties if PII is exposed. Another incorrect approach is to assume that all data collected by ITM is inherently safe or non-sensitive. This assumption overlooks the nuanced nature of monitoring data, which can, in certain configurations or with specific application monitoring, inadvertently capture user inputs or system states that contain PII. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on general security measures without specifically addressing the PII aspect within the ITM environment. While general security is important, it does not substitute for targeted data privacy controls. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Identifying potential data privacy risks associated with the ITM deployment. 2. Understanding the specific data collection capabilities of the ITM agents in use. 3. Consulting relevant data privacy policies and regulations. 4. Implementing technical controls like masking or filtering and procedural controls like access management and data retention policies to mitigate identified risks. 5. Regularly reviewing and auditing the effectiveness of these controls. Question 2. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3 environment is experiencing intermittent connectivity issues with several managed nodes, leading to gaps in historical performance data collection for critical applications. The Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server, TEMS, is reporting a high number of agent connection errors. The immediate business pressure is to restore full data collection as quickly as possible to avoid further data loss and to provide accurate performance metrics for ongoing service level agreement, SLA, reporting. What is the most appropriate course of action for the IBM Tivoli monitoring administrator to address this situation? Option A. Immediately restart the Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server, TEMS, and all affected monitoring agents. Then proceed with verifying that data collection has resumed and that historical data integrity is maintained. Option B. Advise stakeholders that the issue will be investigated when system load decreases and to expect potential data gaps until then. Option C. Document the observed symptoms and error messages, perform a controlled restart of the TEMS and affected agents, and then meticulously verify data collection and the integrity of historical data. Option D. Manually edit the TEMS and agent configuration files to force re-establishment of connections, bypassing any restart procedures to expedite service restoration. The correct answer is A. Immediately restart the Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server TEMS and all affected monitoring agents, then proceed with verifying that data collection has resumed and that historical data integrity is maintained. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for system stability with the long-term implications of data integrity and auditability. The administrator must make a decision that impacts the operational status of critical monitoring components without compromising the ability to investigate past events or ensure compliance with potential future regulatory requirements. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that have significant downstream consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach of documenting the issue, performing a controlled restart of the affected Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server, TEMS, and its associated agents, and then verifying data collection and historical data integrity represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of responsible system administration and IT governance, which emphasize maintaining operational continuity while ensuring data accuracy and the ability to reconstruct events. In the context of IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6.3 administration, this approach upholds the implicit requirement for reliable data collection and reporting, which are foundational for performance analysis, troubleshooting, and potential compliance audits. While specific regulations are not detailed for this exam, the general principles of data integrity and system availability are universally recognized as critical for IT operations. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach would be to immediately restart the TEMS and agents without any documentation or verification. This fails to establish a clear record of the incident and the corrective actions taken, which is crucial for troubleshooting and auditing. It also bypasses the verification step, potentially leaving the system in a state where data is still being lost or corrupted, thereby failing to ensure data integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to manually manipulate log files or configuration settings to force the TEMS back online without a controlled restart. This is highly risky, as it can lead to further corruption of data or system instability, and it completely bypasses any audit trail of the corrective actions. This approach directly undermines the principle of maintaining a verifiable system state. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the issue and wait for it to resolve itself. This demonstrates a lack of proactive system management and a failure to address potential data loss or service degradation. It also leaves the organization vulnerable to performance issues or compliance breaches if the underlying problem persists and impacts critical reporting or analysis. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first prioritizing understanding the scope and impact of the problem. This involves gathering information, consulting documentation, and assessing the potential risks of different actions. A structured approach, including controlled restarts, thorough verification, and comprehensive documentation, ensures that systems are restored reliably and that a clear audit trail is maintained. This methodical process is essential for maintaining system health, ensuring data integrity, and meeting operational and potential regulatory expectations. Question 3. The control framework reveals that the IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6.3 environment is experiencing significant performance degradation, impacting critical business applications. The standard change management process requires a minimum of 48 hours for approval, but the current situation demands immediate attention to restore service. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this critical performance issue while adhering to operational best practices and the principles of controlled change? Option A. Initiate an emergency change request through the established process, documenting the critical nature of the issue and the proposed immediate solution, and seek expedited approval. Option B. Proceed with implementing a workaround solution that has not undergone formal testing or validation to alleviate the immediate symptoms. Option C. Defer the fix until the next scheduled maintenance window, as adhering to the standard change control process is paramount. Option D. Implement the necessary fix immediately without any formal documentation or approval, as the system is critical and downtime is unacceptable. The correct answer is A. Initiate an emergency change request through the established process, documenting the critical nature of the issue and the proposed immediate solution, and seek expedited approval. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for immediate issue resolution with adherence to established change management processes. The professional challenge lies in determining the appropriate course of action when a critical system is experiencing performance degradation, and the standard change control procedures might delay the necessary fix. This requires careful judgment to assess the severity of the impact, the potential risks of bypassing procedures, and the availability of alternative, less disruptive solutions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and documented response to a critical incident. By initiating an emergency change process, the IT team can expedite the deployment of a fix while still maintaining a record of the change, its justification, and the individuals involved. This aligns with the principles of good governance and auditability, ensuring that even urgent actions are traceable and accountable. Furthermore, it demonstrates a commitment to minimizing risk by seeking approval, even under duress, and documenting the rationale for any deviations from standard operating procedures. This approach upholds the integrity of the IT environment and supports compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulatory requirements for incident and change management. An incorrect approach that bypasses all change control, even for an emergency, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It undermines the established controls designed to prevent unintended consequences, security vulnerabilities, or conflicts with other system components. This lack of documentation and approval can lead to an audit trail gap, making it difficult to investigate future incidents or demonstrate compliance with operational standards. Ethically, it can foster a culture of ad hoc decision-making, potentially leading to increased errors and a diminished sense of responsibility. Another incorrect approach, which involves waiting for the next scheduled maintenance window despite a critical performance issue, fails to adequately address the immediate impact on business operations and user experience. This demonstrates a lack of urgency and a disregard for the potential financial or reputational damage caused by prolonged system downtime or severe performance degradation. It also suggests a failure to properly assess and prioritize incidents based on their business criticality. A third incorrect approach, which involves implementing a fix without proper testing or validation, poses a substantial risk of introducing new problems or exacerbating the existing one. This is a direct violation of sound IT practices and can lead to further system instability, data corruption, or security breaches. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to adhere to quality assurance principles, which are fundamental to maintaining a reliable IT infrastructure. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a rapid assessment of the incident's impact, a clear understanding of the available change management procedures, including emergency change protocols, and a risk-based decision-making framework. Professionals should always strive to follow documented processes, but when faced with critical situations, they must leverage established emergency procedures. This involves clear communication with stakeholders, thorough documentation of the incident and the chosen resolution path, and a post-incident review to identify any process improvements. Question 4. Assessment of the most appropriate immediate response to a critical IBM Tivoli monitoring alert indicating a potential performance degradation on a key application server, when the standard troubleshooting documentation for this specific alert is incomplete and the business impact of downtime is extremely high. Option A. Attempt to manually adjust critical performance parameters within the Tivoli monitoring agent configuration based on a hunch about the likely cause, without consulting any documentation or seeking expert advice. Option B. Initiate a controlled restart of the Tivoli monitoring agent on the affected server after consulting the latest available documentation for known issues and potential workarounds, while preparing a rollback plan. Option C. Proceed with a full server reboot to ensure all services are reset, assuming this will resolve the performance issue without further investigation. Option D. Immediately apply a recently documented fix for a similar but not identical alert on a different server, based on a colleague's recommendation, to restore service as quickly as possible. The correct answer is B. Initiate a controlled restart of the Tivoli monitoring agent on the affected server after consulting the latest available documentation for known issues and potential workarounds, while preparing a rollback plan. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for immediate issue resolution with the requirement to maintain system integrity and adhere to established change management procedures. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass critical validation steps, potentially introducing new problems or exacerbating existing ones. The professional challenge lies in making a rapid, informed decision that prioritizes both service availability and long-term system stability, while also considering the implications of deviating from documented processes. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, risk-based decision-making process. It prioritizes understanding the root cause of the alert before implementing any solution. This includes consulting existing documentation, knowledge bases, and potentially engaging with subject matter experts. If a deviation from standard procedures is deemed necessary due to the urgency, it must be a conscious, documented decision with a clear rollback plan. This aligns with best practices in IT service management, emphasizing proactive problem-solving and controlled change, even under duress. The focus on understanding the why behind the alert before acting is crucial for preventing recurrence and ensuring that the fix addresses the actual problem, not just a symptom. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a fix without a thorough understanding of the alert's root cause is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of due diligence, as it assumes a solution without evidence. This can lead to unintended consequences, such as data corruption, system instability, or security vulnerabilities, which could have severe operational and compliance implications. Blindly applying a known fix for a similar alert without verifying its applicability to the current situation is also professionally unacceptable. It demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and a failure to adapt to specific circumstances, potentially causing more harm than good. Relying solely on anecdotal evidence or the opinion of a single individual without consulting official documentation or established procedures is another failure. This bypasses the established governance and control mechanisms designed to ensure system stability and security. It introduces an unacceptable level of risk by not leveraging collective knowledge and approved methodologies. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured problem-solving framework. First, they must gather all available information related to the alert. Second, they should consult established documentation and knowledge bases to understand potential causes and known solutions. Third, they need to assess the impact and urgency of the alert. If immediate action is required and standard procedures are insufficient, they must evaluate the risks associated with any proposed deviation, ensuring a clear rollback strategy is in place. Finally, all actions taken, including any deviations from standard procedures, must be thoroughly documented for audit and future reference. This systematic approach ensures accountability, promotes learning, and upholds the integrity of the IT environment. Question 5. Comparative studies suggest that when faced with a critical performance degradation impacting the Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server (TEMS) in an IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6.3 environment, leading to slow response times and potential data collection gaps, an administrator must act decisively. However, the method of resolution is paramount, considering the need for both immediate stability and long-term system health. Which of the following actions best aligns with professional best practices and the implicit requirements of maintaining a robust and auditable monitoring infrastructure? Option A. Immediately restart the Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server (TEMS) to restore responsiveness, assuming this will resolve the underlying issue, and then investigate the cause later. Option B. Engage the IBM Tivoli Monitoring Support Team to diagnose the performance bottleneck. following their guided troubleshooting steps and documenting all actions and findings meticulously. Option C. Manually adjust the TEMS configuration parameters related to database connections and thread pools without consulting documentation or support, hoping to find an optimal setting. Option D. Disable monitoring for the application experiencing the most significant data collection issues to reduce the load on the TEMS, and wait for a scheduled maintenance window to investigate further. Correct answer is A. Immediately restart the Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server TEMS to restore responsiveness, assuming this will resolve the underlying issue, and then investigate the cause later. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for immediate system availability with the imperative to maintain data integrity and adhere to established change management protocols. The professional challenge lies in the pressure to resolve a critical performance issue quickly, which can tempt administrators to bypass standard procedures. This bypass, while seemingly expedient, carries significant risks, including unintended consequences, data corruption, and a violation of audit trails. Careful judgment is required to assess the true impact of the issue and to select a resolution that is both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented investigation. By engaging the IBM Tivoli Monitoring ITM support team and following their guidance, the administrator leverages specialized expertise and adheres to vendor-recommended troubleshooting methodologies. This ensures that any actions taken are informed, tested, and aligned with best practices for the ITM v6.3 environment. Furthermore, documenting the issue, the investigation steps, and the eventual resolution provides a crucial audit trail, essential for compliance, future problem solving, and demonstrating due diligence. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT management and operational excellence expected in regulated environments. An incorrect approach that involves immediately restarting the Tivoli Enterprise Monitoring Server TEMS without proper analysis or consultation is professionally unacceptable. This action, while potentially resolving the symptom, fails to address the root cause. It risks masking underlying issues that could resurface or lead to more severe problems. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this bypasses the established change management process, which is often a requirement for compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations governing IT operations and data handling. Such an action creates an undocumented change, making it difficult to trace the cause of future incidents and potentially violating audit requirements. Another incorrect approach, such as disabling monitoring for the affected application without understanding the impact, is also professionally unsound. While it might temporarily alleviate the TEMS load, it blinds the organization to the actual performance of a critical application. This lack of visibility is a significant operational risk and can lead to undetected application failures or performance degradations that impact business operations. Ethically, it represents a failure to provide adequate monitoring and oversight for critical systems. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Assess the immediate impact. Understand the criticality of the affected application and the scope of the performance degradation. 2. Consult documentation and support. Refer to ITM v6.3 documentation and engage vendor support for known issues or recommended troubleshooting steps. 3. Follow established procedures. Adhere to the organization's change management and incident response protocols. 4. Prioritize root cause analysis. Focus on identifying the underlying reason for the performance issue rather than just addressing the symptoms. 5. Document all actions. Maintain a detailed record of the problem, investigation, decisions made, and resolutions implemented. 6. Communicate effectively. Keep stakeholders informed of the situation and the progress of the resolution. Question 6. Process analysis reveals that an organization is implementing IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6.3 to gain visibility into its critical IT infrastructure. The primary objective is to proactively identify performance bottlenecks and potential security threats. However, the organization is also subject to stringent data privacy regulations that govern the handling of sensitive information. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance while achieving the monitoring objectives? Option A. Disable detailed security logging and auditing features within IBM Tivoli monitoring to minimize the volume of data collected and reduce storage costs. Option B. Collect all system data without specific consideration for its sensitivity, assuming that the monitoring tool's default settings are compliant with all applicable regulations. Option C. Implement IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6. 3. Carefully configuring data collection policies to gather only necessary metrics, anonymizing or pseudonymizing sensitive data where feasible, and establishing strict data retention schedules aligned with regulatory requirements. Option D. Configure monitoring agents to collect all available system metrics and logs, and retain this data indefinitely to ensure a comprehensive historical record for security analysis. The correct answer is D. Configure monitoring agents to collect all available system metrics and logs, and retain this data indefinitely to ensure a comprehensive historical record for security analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in ensuring regulatory compliance within an IT infrastructure management context. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient system monitoring with the stringent requirements of data privacy and security regulations. Organizations are entrusted with sensitive data, and any lapse in monitoring or data handling practices can lead to significant legal repercussions, financial penalties, and reputational damage. The complexity arises from the distributed nature of IT environments, the volume of data generated, and the evolving threat landscape, all of which necessitate a robust and compliant monitoring strategy. Careful judgment is required to select monitoring tools and configurations that meet operational needs without compromising regulatory obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6. 3. With a specific focus on configuring data collection and retention policies that align with relevant data privacy regulations. This means ensuring that only necessary data is collected, that data is anonymized or pseudonymized where appropriate, and that retention periods are strictly adhered to. This aligns with the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental tenets of data protection laws. By configuring the monitoring agents and the Tivoli Enterprise Portal to collect and store data in a compliant manner, the organization demonstrates due diligence in protecting sensitive information and avoids potential breaches of regulatory requirements. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust and avoiding legal entanglements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Collecting all available system data without regard for its sensitivity or regulatory implications is a significant regulatory failure. This approach violates the principle of data minimization, which mandates collecting only the data that is necessary for a specific, legitimate purpose. It also increases the risk of unauthorized access to sensitive information, leading to potential breaches of data privacy laws. Configuring monitoring agents to retain all collected data indefinitely, regardless of its relevance or regulatory retention limits, is another critical failure. This practice not only consumes excessive storage resources, but also creates a substantial liability. Many regulations impose strict limits on how long personal or sensitive data can be retained. Indefinite retention increases the surface area for potential data breaches and can lead to non-compliance with data disposal requirements. Disabling security logging and auditing features within IBM Tivoli monitoring to reduce data volume is a direct contravention of security and compliance mandates. Security logs are essential for detecting and investigating security incidents, as well as for demonstrating compliance with various regulatory frameworks. Disabling these features leaves the system vulnerable and makes it impossible to provide an audit trail, which is a common requirement for regulatory compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing and managing IT monitoring solutions must adopt a risk-based and compliance-driven approach. This involves a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, depending on the jurisdiction and data types involved. The decision-making process should prioritize 1. Identifying sensitive data that may be collected by monitoring tools. 2. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements related to the collection, processing, storage, and retention of such data. 3. Configuring monitoring tools, such as IBM Tivoli Monitoring v6. 3. To adhere to these requirements through granular control over data collection, anonymization, and retention policies. 4. Regularly reviewing and auditing monitoring configurations to ensure ongoing compliance. 5. prioritizing security logging and auditing to maintain an auditable trail of system activity. Question 7. To address the challenge of ensuring regulatory compliance when configuring IBM Tivoli monitoring v6, 3 agents to collect system performance data that might include sensitive information. Which of the following approaches best aligns with data privacy principles and best practices for IT administration? Option A. Implement data masking and anonymization techniques at the agent level for any data fields identified as potentially sensitive, and establish strict data retention policies for collected metrics that align with regulatory requirements. Option B. Rely on the default configuration settings for all Tivoli monitoring agents and assume that the vendor has addressed all potential data privacy concerns in their out-of-the-box deployment. Option C. Configure all monitoring agents to collect the maximum amount of detailed performance data available, assuming that all data is necessary for comprehensive troubleshooting, and store this data indefinitely in a central repository. Option D. Grant broad administrative access to the Tivoli Enterprise portal and all collected monitoring data to all IT operations staff to facilitate quick access for any potential issue. The correct answer is A. Implement data masking and anonymization techniques at the agent level for any data fields identified as potentially sensitive, and establish strict data retention policies for collected metrics that align with regulatory requirements. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for efficient system monitoring with the imperative to comply with data privacy regulations. In the context of IBM Tivoli monitoring v6, 3 administration, this often involves handling sensitive system performance data that could inadvertently contain personally identifiable information, PI, or other confidential details. The professional challenge lies in configuring monitoring agents and data collection policies without compromising regulatory adherence, particularly concerning data retention, access control, and anonymization. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and policy-driven method to data handling by implementing granular data masking and anonymization techniques at the source, and by strictly adhering to defined data retention policies that align with regulatory requirements. An administrator ensures that sensitive data is protected throughout its lifecycle. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to many data privacy frameworks. Best professional practice dictates that compliance is not an afterthought, but an integral part of system design and operational procedures. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the regulatory landscape. Collecting all data without consideration for its sensitivity or potential for PII exposure is a direct violation of data minimization principles. Storing data indefinitely without a clear retention policy or business justification increases the risk of unauthorized access and breaches, contravening data security and privacy mandates. Granting broad access to monitoring data without a need-to-know basis or proper authorization mechanisms also poses significant regulatory and ethical risks, potentially leading to privacy violations and non-compliance with access control requirements. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making process. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data being monitored, identifying potential data privacy risks associated with the monitoring configuration, and implementing controls to mitigate those risks. Regular audits and reviews of monitoring policies and data handling practices are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and adapt to evolving regulatory landscapes. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a critical vulnerability in the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6, 3 infrastructure that could expose sensitive operational data. Given the strict regulatory environment governing data protection and system integrity, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address this identified risk? Option A. Implement a temporary workaround that mitigates the immediate threat, but defer the permanent patching process until the next scheduled maintenance window to avoid operational disruption. Option B. Immediately deploy the vendor-provided patch to the production environment without extensive testing, prioritizing speed of remediation. Option C. Document the vulnerability and its potential impact, initiate a formal risk assessment, and develop a phased remediation plan that includes testing and stakeholder consultation before applying any changes. Option D. Ignore the vulnerability for now, as the system is currently functioning correctly and the risk of exploitation is deemed low by the operations team. The correct answer is B. Immediately deploy the vendor-provided patch to the production environment without extensive testing, prioritizing speed of remediation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations where a critical system, IBM Tivoli monitoring V6.3, is identified as a potential vulnerability point. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational demands of maintaining system availability and performance. A misstep in addressing this vulnerability could lead to regulatory noncompliance, data breaches, or service disruptions, all of which carry significant financial and reputational risks. The pressure to act quickly without compromising ongoing operations requires a thorough understanding of the system's architecture, the nature of the vulnerability, and the applicable regulatory landscape. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that prioritizes risk mitigation in alignment with regulatory requirements. This includes a thorough assessment of the vulnerability impact, consultation with relevant stakeholders, security, operations, compliance, and the development of a remediation plan that considers patch testing, rollback procedures, and scheduled downtime to minimize disruption. This approach is best professional practice because it demonstrates due diligence, adheres to the principles of risk management, and ensures that remediation efforts are both effective and compliant with relevant regulations. Specifically, for a U.S.-based regulatory framework, this would align with principles found in NIST guidelines, e.g., NIST SB 800-53, Security and Privacy Controls for Information Systems and Organizations, which emphasize a risk-based approach to security, including vulnerability management and incident response. The process ensures that actions taken are justifiable, auditable, and contribute to the overall security posture of the organization. Incorrect approach is analysis. Ignoring the vulnerability or delaying remediation indefinitely represents a direct failure to comply with regulatory mandates that require timely patching and vulnerability management. This creates an unacceptable risk of exploitation, leading to potential data breaches and significant fines under regulations like HIPAA if health data is involved, or SOX if financial data is involved. Applying a patch without proper testing or a rollback plan is a reckless approach that prioritizes speed over safety. While it might seem like a quick fix, it carries a high risk of introducing new system instability or operational issues, which could indirectly lead to compliance failures if critical monitoring functions are disrupted. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and adherence to established IT best practices for change management. Implementing a workaround that does not fully address the root cause of the vulnerability without a clear plan for permanent remediation is also problematic. While it might offer temporary relief, it leaves the system exposed to potential future exploits and may not satisfy the intent of regulatory requirements for robust security controls. This approach often indicates a lack of commitment to long-term security and compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the regulatory context. This involves identifying all applicable laws, regulations, and industry standards that govern the handling of data and the security of IT systems. Next, a comprehensive risk assessment should be conducted to understand the potential impact of the vulnerability. This assessment should inform the prioritization of remediation efforts. The decision-making process should involve collaboration with all relevant teams, including IT operations, security, and compliance. A documented remediation plan, including testing and rollback strategies, is crucial. Finally, continuous monitoring and auditing are necessary to ensure that the implemented controls remain effective and compliant. This structured, risk-aware, and collaborative approach ensures that decisions are defensible, effective, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 9. The efficiency study reveals that the current configuration of IBM Tivoli monitoring V6.3 is generating a significant volume of audit log data, impacting system performance. To address this, the administrator is considering several approaches to optimize resource utilization. Which approach best balances operational efficiency with the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance frameworks that mandate comprehensive audit trails? Option A. Rely on manual ad hoc data extraction from system event logs when an audit is imminent, rather than maintaining continuous automated audit logging within ITM. Option B. Reduce the retention period for all audit logs to the minimum acceptable by internal policy, irrespective of external regulatory mandates. Option C. Disable detailed audit logging for non-critical components to reduce the overall data footprint and improve system responsiveness. Option D. Implement automated data aggregation and summarization within ITM to reduce the volume of raw audit logs stored, while ensuring that critical audit events and their associated metadata are retained according to regulatory retention periods. The correct answer is D. Implement automated data aggregation and summarization within ITM to reduce the volume of raw audit logs stored, while ensuring that critical audit events and their associated metadata are retained according to regulatory retention periods. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for efficient system monitoring with the imperative of regulatory compliance. The core tension lies in ensuring that the IBM Tivoli monitoring IBM v6.3 environment is configured to meet audit requirements without introducing unnecessary complexity or performance overhead. The professional challenge is to interpret and apply the relevant regulatory framework, which in this context is assumed to be US-based for the C2010-510 exam, to the technical configuration of ITM. This requires a deep understanding of both the ITM product capabilities and the specific mandates of the applicable regulations. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to the regulatory framework by ensuring that all audit trails and data retention policies are configured within ITM to meet or exceed the specified requirements. This demonstrates a commitment to compliance, which is paramount in regulated industries. By proactively configuring ITM to capture the necessary data points and maintain them for the mandated period, the administrator ensures that the organization can readily provide evidence during audits, thereby mitigating legal and financial risks. This approach aligns with the principle of defense in depth for regulatory compliance, where technical controls are implemented to support policy and procedural requirements. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on performance optimization without considering audit requirements would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a misunderstanding of the primary objective in a regulated environment, where compliance often takes precedence over marginal performance gains. Such an approach risks significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and potential legal action if the organization is found to be non-compliant during an audit. It represents a failure to integrate IT operations with overarching business and legal obligations. Another incorrect approach that involves disabling or reducing the granularity of audit logging to improve performance would also be a critical failure. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of most regulatory frameworks, which mandate comprehensive and accurate record-keeping. The ethical failure here is the deliberate obfuscation or reduction of information that is legally required to be preserved. This action could be interpreted as an attempt to conceal information or avoid accountability, leading to severe consequences. A third incorrect approach that relies on manual data extraction for audit purposes, rather than leveraging ITM's automated capabilities, is inefficient and prone to error. While it might technically capture the required data, it introduces significant operational risk. The regulatory failure lies in the unreliability and potential incompleteness of manually managed audit data. This approach fails to establish a robust and auditable process, making it difficult to consistently meet compliance obligations. A professional reasoning process for navigating such situations should involve a clear understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape. This means identifying the specific regulations that govern the organization's data handling and system operations. Once identified, the administrator must translate these regulatory requirements into concrete ITM configuration settings. This involves consulting ITM documentation, best practices, and potentially seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments. The decision-making process should always start with the compliance mandate, followed by technical implementation that effectively meets those mandates, while also considering operational efficiency and security. Prioritization should always be given to ensuring that the system is configured to be auditable and compliant, with performance tuning being a secondary consideration that does not compromise these primary objectives. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of how IBM Tivoli monitoring v6 3 can be configured to collect application performance metrics while strictly adhering to data privacy regulations. When setting up monitoring for an application that handles sensitive customer information, what is the most prudent approach to ensure compliance with data protection laws? Option A. Configure ITM to collect all available performance metrics and rely on robust access controls to protect the data. Option B. Disable monitoring for specific application components that are known to generate sensitive data, even if it compromises comprehensive performance visibility. Option C. Proactively configure ITM to filter out or mask any data fields that could potentially contain personally identifiable information, PI, or sensitive business data, ensuring only essential performance metrics are captured. Option D. Collect all performance metrics and assume that standard IT security practices are sufficient to meet regulatory requirements without specific data filtering. The correct answer is A. Configure ITM to collect all available performance metrics and rely on robust access controls to protect the data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for robust monitoring with the imperative to comply with data privacy regulations. The professional is tasked with configuring IBM Tivoli monitoring, IBM, to capture performance metrics for a critical application. The challenge lies in ensuring that the data collected, while useful for performance analysis, does not inadvertently capture personally identifiable information, PI, or sensitive business data that could violate regulatory requirements. This requires a nuanced understanding of both ITM's capabilities and the specific data protection laws applicable to the organization's operating jurisdiction. The risk of non-compliance, which can lead to significant fines, reputational damage, and legal action, makes careful judgment paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and informed configuration of ITM, specifically focusing on data masking and filtering. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and privacy by design, which are foundational to many regulatory frameworks, including those governing data protection in the U.S., e.g., HIPAA for healthcare data, CCPA for California consumer data. By configuring ITM to exclude or mask sensitive fields within the collected metrics, the administrator ensures that only necessary performance data is retained, thereby reducing the risk of unauthorized access or disclosure of PII. This approach demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical data handling, safeguarding both the organization and its customers. Incorrect approaches analysis. Collecting all available data without explicit consideration for privacy implications represents a significant regulatory failure. This approach violates the principle of data minimization, which mandates collecting only the data that is strictly necessary for the stated purpose. If this data includes PII, it could lead to violations of regulations like HIPAA or CCPA, exposing the organization to penalties. Configuring ITM to collect data, but then relying solely on post-collection security measures, like access controls, without addressing the data content itself is also problematic. While access controls are crucial, they do not prevent the initial collection of sensitive data, which remains a compliance risk. If sensitive data is collected, even if secured, a breach or audit could reveal non-compliance with data minimization principles. Disabling monitoring for certain critical application components due to fear of data exposure, without exploring alternative methods for data collection or anonymization, is an inefficient and potentially detrimental approach. This can lead to a lack of visibility into application performance, hindering troubleshooting and optimization efforts, and ultimately impacting business operations. It fails to leverage the capabilities of ITM to achieve both operational efficiency and regulatory adherence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, integrating regulatory considerations into the ITM configuration process from the outset. This involves understanding the specific data types the application handles, identifying potential PII or sensitive data within performance metrics, and leveraging ITM's features, like attribute group filtering and workspace configuration, to exclude or mask such data. Collaboration with legal and compliance teams is essential to ensure that the monitoring strategy aligns with all applicable regulations. When in doubt, prioritizing data minimization and seeking expert guidance is the most responsible course of action. Question 11. Consider a scenario where an organization is implementing IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. To monitor a critical financial services application. The monitoring data includes transaction volumes, error rates, and resource utilization metrics. A compliance officer has raised concerns about potential exposure of sensitive customer financial data indirectly through these metrics, given the application's nature. The IT operations team needs to ensure comprehensive monitoring for performance and availability. What is the most appropriate approach to balance these competing requirements while adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks governing financial data privacy and security? Option A. Implement robust role-based access controls within IBM Tivoli monitoring, ensuring that only authorized personnel with a legitimate need can access the monitoring data, and conduct regular audits of access logs to verify compliance with internal policies and relevant U.S. data privacy regulations. Option B. Disable the collection of any metrics that could potentially be linked to specific customer transactions or user sessions, prioritizing absolute data obscurity over comprehensive performance monitoring. Option C. Configure IBM Tivoli monitoring to collect the maximum amount of data possible to ensure no performance anomaly goes unnoticed, and assume that the metrics are sufficiently anonymized by their nature to not require further privacy considerations. Option D. Rely solely on the default security settings of IBM Tivoli monitoring, assuming they are sufficient to meet all regulatory requirements for data privacy and security in a financial services environment. The correct answer is A. Implement robust role-based access controls within IBM Tivoli monitoring, ensuring that only authorized personnel with a legitimate need can access the monitoring data, and conduct regular audits of access logs to verify compliance with internal policies and relevant U.S. data privacy regulations. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge related to regulatory compliance within the context of IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Administration. The core difficulty lies in balancing the operational need for timely data access with the stringent requirements of data privacy and security regulations. Organizations are increasingly subject to regulations that dictate how sensitive data, including system performance metrics that could indirectly reveal user activity or system vulnerabilities, must be handled, stored, and accessed. A failure to adhere to these regulations can result in significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Therefore, careful judgment is required to implement monitoring solutions that are both effective and compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the specified regulatory framework, which in this context would be the relevant U.S. data privacy and security laws applicable to IT operations and data handling. This involves understanding the scope of data collected by IBM Tivoli monitoring, identifying any sensitive information, and implementing appropriate access controls, anonymization, or pseudonymization techniques as mandated by law. It also includes establishing clear data retention policies and audit trails to demonstrate compliance. This proactive and legally informed approach ensures that the monitoring system operates within the bounds of the law, protecting both the organization and its users. Each incorrect approach carries specific regulatory and ethical failures. An approach that focuses solely on operational efficiency without considering data privacy regulations risks violating laws such as HIPAA, if health data is involved, GDPR, if EU citizen data is processed. Though this exam is US-centric, the principle applies to general data privacy or other state-specific data protection statutes. This could lead to unauthorized access or disclosure of sensitive information, resulting in severe fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring or downplaying the potential for sensitive data within monitoring logs, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the full implications of the data being collected. This negligence can lead to unintentional breaches of privacy. Finally, an approach that relies on outdated or inadequate security measures for data access control fails to meet the reasonable security standards often stipulated in regulations, leaving the organization vulnerable to data breaches and noncompliance. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a multi-step approach. First, thoroughly understand the regulatory landscape applicable to the data being monitored and the organization's operations. Second, conduct a comprehensive data inventory and risk assessment to identify sensitive information within the monitoring data. Third, consult with legal and compliance departments to ensure proposed monitoring configurations and data handling practices align with all relevant laws and internal policies. Fourth, implement robust access controls, encryption, and anonymization techniques where necessary. Fifth, establish clear documentation, training, and audit procedures to maintain ongoing compliance and demonstrate accountability. Question 12. The investigation demonstrates that a critical security vulnerability has been identified within a core application monitored by IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. To alleviate immediate performance degradation reported by end users, a proposal is made to temporarily disable several monitoring agents related to that application's performance metrics, with the intention of re-enabling them once the vulnerability is patched. What is the most appropriate course of action to manage this situation, considering the principles of risk assessment and system administration within the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6? 3 framework? Option A. Proceed with temporarily disabling the monitoring agents to address the immediate performance issues, documenting the decision and planning to re-enable them post-patch. Option B. Inform end users that performance issues are a known consequence of the security vulnerability and advise them to limit their usage until the patch is applied. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the potential security implications of disabling the monitoring agents, evaluate alternative performance tuning methods, and obtain formal approval before making any changes. Option D. Immediately disable all monitoring agents for the affected application to ensure maximum performance improvement while the vulnerability is addressed. Correct answer is A. Proceed with temporarily disabling the monitoring agents to address the immediate performance issues, documenting the decision and planning to re-enable them post-patch. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between maintaining system performance and ensuring comprehensive security monitoring. The need to balance these competing demands requires careful judgment, especially when considering the impact of security measures on operational efficiency. Adhering to the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3 administration framework, which emphasizes proactive risk management and compliance, is paramount. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, evidence-based risk assessment before implementing changes that could affect system stability or security posture. This aligns with general IT governance principles and the implicit requirement within any administration framework to operate responsibly and with due diligence. Specifically, it involves understanding the potential impact of disabling monitoring components on the ability to detect and respond to security incidents, thereby fulfilling the organization's duty of care. This methodical approach ensures that any decision is informed, justifiable, and minimizes unintended consequences, thereby upholding the integrity of the monitoring system and the security it is intended to provide. Disabling monitoring components without a thorough risk assessment is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in managing IT systems, potentially violating internal policies and industry best practices that mandate continuous monitoring for security threats. Secondly, it can lead to a failure to detect and report security breaches in a timely manner, which could have significant legal and financial repercussions for the organization, and potentially violate data protection regulations if sensitive information is compromised. Thirdly, it undermines the purpose of implementing a monitoring solution in the first place, representing a failure to effectively utilize the deployed technology for its intended security and operational benefits. This can be seen as a dereliction of professional duty to maintain a secure and observable IT environment. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the proposed change. This includes identifying the potential risks and benefits, assessing the impact on security and operational objectives, consulting relevant stakeholders, e.g., security team, operations team, documenting the decision-making process, and establishing clear rollback procedures. A risk-based approach, where decisions are driven by a clear understanding of potential negative outcomes and mitigation strategies, is crucial for responsible IT administration. Question 13. Upon reviewing the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6, 3 environment, a critical vulnerability is identified in a core component that, if exploited, could lead to unauthorized access and data exfiltration. However, the remediation process for this vulnerability is complex and requires significant downtime, potentially impacting several critical business operations. Simultaneously, several medium-severity vulnerabilities have been identified in less critical components, which are easier to patch with minimal disruption. What is the most appropriate approach to managing these identified vulnerabilities? Option A. Focus on patching the medium-severity vulnerabilities immediately due to their ease of implementation and the potential for a quick win in improving the overall security posture. Option B. Defer all vulnerability remediation until the next scheduled major system upgrade to minimize disruption and consolidate patching efforts. Option C. Prioritize immediate remediation of the critical vulnerability, even if it requires a carefully planned and communicated outage, while scheduling the medium-severity vulnerabilities for the next routine maintenance window. Option D. Address all medium-severity vulnerabilities first, as they are easier to fix and have less impact on operations, and then assess the feasibility of patching the critical vulnerability at a later date. The correct answer is C. Prioritize immediate remediation of the critical vulnerability, even if it requires a carefully planned and communicated outage, while scheduling the medium-severity vulnerabilities for the next routine maintenance window. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational stability with the long-term implications of security vulnerabilities. The administrator must make a judgment call on how to prioritize remediation efforts when faced with limited resources and potential business impact. Careful judgment is required to avoid either overreacting and causing unnecessary disruption, or underreacting and leaving the environment exposed to significant risk. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with a structured and proactive risk management methodology. By identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, the administrator can make informed decisions about resource allocation and remediation strategies. This systematic approach ensures that the most critical vulnerabilities are addressed first, minimizing the overall risk exposure to the organization. This aligns with general IT governance principles that emphasize a risk-based approach to security and operational management, ensuring that controls are proportionate to the identified risks. While specific regulations for IBM Tivoli monitoring v6.3 administration are not explicitly provided in a separate regulatory document for this exam, the principles of due diligence and prudent IT management are universally expected. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the severity of the vulnerability without considering the business context or the likelihood of exploitation fails to implement a comprehensive risk assessment. This could lead to misallocation of resources, addressing low-impact vulnerabilities while critical ones remain unaddressed, or causing significant operational disruption for minor risks. This is professionally unacceptable, as it demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and adherence to best practices in IT risk management. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes remediation based on the ease of implementation rather than the actual risk posed is also professionally unacceptable. This approach can lead to a false sense of security, as easily fixed but less critical issues are resolved, while more complex but high-risk vulnerabilities are neglected. This deviates from the core principle of risk management, which is to mitigate the most significant threats to the organization's assets and operations. A third incorrect approach that defers all remediation until a scheduled maintenance window, regardless of the severity or exploitability of the vulnerability, demonstrates a failure to respond effectively to emerging threats. While planned maintenance is important for stability, critical vulnerabilities may require immediate attention to prevent potential breaches or service disruptions. This reactive stance, rather than a proactive and risk-informed one, can expose the organization to unacceptable levels of risk and is a failure in professional IT security and operational management. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's risk tolerance, business objectives, and available resources. It requires a systematic process of identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. This process should be iterative and regularly reviewed to adapt to the evolving threat landscape and business environment. Question 14. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess potential risks within the IBM Tivoli monitoring V6. 3. Infrastructure. Considering the operational criticality of the environment, which approach to risk assessment would best ensure the stability and integrity of the monitored services while efficiently allocating administrative resources? Option A. Implement immediate configuration, changes to all monitoring components based on a general understanding of potential vulnerabilities, without a detailed impact analysis. Option B. Perform a superficial scan of all monitoring agents and servers to identify any deviations from baseline configurations, regardless of their operational impact. Option C. Rely exclusively on historical incident reports to identify risks, without considering current system configurations or potential new threats. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive, impact-driven assessment focusing on critical monitoring components and their potential failure modes, followed by a phased implementation of mitigation strategies. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive, impact-driven assessment focusing on critical monitoring components and their potential failure modes, followed by a phased implementation of mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of a live production environment. The core difficulty lies in identifying and prioritizing risks without causing undue disruption to critical business operations. A robust risk assessment in IBM Tivoli monitoring IBM V6. 3 administration is not merely a technical exercise but a strategic one, directly impacting system stability, data integrity, and ultimately, business continuity. The chosen methodology must be both thorough and efficient. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it aligns with the principles of proactive risk management and operational resilience, which are implicitly supported by ITM's design for monitoring and managing complex IT environments. By focusing on critical components and potential impact, it ensures that resources are allocated to the most significant threats first. This systematic, impact-driven approach minimizes the likelihood of unforeseen outages or data loss, thereby upholding the integrity and availability of the monitored services. This aligns with the general IT governance principles of ensuring system reliability and security. An incorrect approach that prioritizes a superficial scan of all components without regard for their criticality fails to address the most pressing risks. This is professionally unacceptable, as it wastes valuable administrative time and resources on low-impact issues, leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. It also risks overwhelming the monitoring system itself with excessive, low-value data. Another incorrect approach that involves making changes to the production environment without a prior, thorough risk assessment is a direct violation of sound IT operational practices. This introduces unnecessary risk of system instability or data corruption, potentially leading to significant business disruption and reputational damage. Such actions would be considered negligent in a professional IT environment. A third incorrect approach that relies solely on historical incident data without considering current system configurations or emerging threats is also professionally deficient. While historical data is valuable, it is not a complete picture. IT environments are dynamic, and new risks can emerge due to software updates, configuration changes, or evolving threat landscapes. Ignoring these factors leads to an incomplete and potentially misleading risk assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a phased approach. First, identify critical assets and business processes supported by ITM. Second, conduct a threat and vulnerability analysis for these critical components, considering both internal and external factors. Third, assess the potential impact of identified risks on business operations. Fourth, prioritize risks based on their likelihood and impact. Finally, develop and implement mitigation strategies, followed by continuous monitoring and reassessment. This structured methodology ensures that risk management efforts are targeted, effective, and aligned with business objectives. Question 15. Examination of the data shows that several potential security vulnerabilities have been identified within the IBM Tivoli monitoring V6. 3 environment, impacting its ability to securely collect and report on system performance and availability. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to address these findings? Option A. Immediately apply all available vendor patches and updates to the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Infrastructure to eliminate all identified vulnerabilities. Option B. Focus on optimizing the performance of the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Agents and servers, as performance issues can sometimes mask underlying security concerns. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify the severity and potential impact of each vulnerability and prioritize remediation efforts based on this analysis. Option D. Document the vulnerabilities and defer any remediation actions until the next scheduled maintenance window to avoid disrupting current monitoring operations. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify the severity and potential impact of each vulnerability and prioritize remediation efforts based on this analysis. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT administration where a critical monitoring system, IBM Tivoli monitoring v6, 3, is found to have potential vulnerabilities. A professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for system availability and performance with the imperative to address security risks without causing undue disruption. The complexity arises from the interconnectedness of monitoring systems with production environments and the potential impact of patching or configuration changes on ongoing operations. A hasty or ill-informed decision could lead to system downtime, data loss, or the introduction of new, unforeseen issues. Careful judgment is required to prioritize actions based on a thorough understanding of the risks and the potential consequences of each mitigation strategy. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment process. This aligns with best practices in IT governance and security management, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks emphasizing due diligence and the protection of information assets. Risk assessment allows for the identification, analysis, and evaluation of potential threats and vulnerabilities. By understanding the likelihood and impact of each identified risk, administrators can make informed decisions about mitigation strategies. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical issues first, minimizing the potential for negative outcomes. It also provides a documented basis for decision, which is crucial for compliance and audit purposes. This methodical process is the cornerstone of responsible system administration and aligns with the principle of maintaining system integrity and security. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the identified vulnerabilities is professionally unacceptable because it represents a failure to exercise due diligence in protecting the IT environment. This directly contravenes the implicit expectation of maintaining system security and availability, which could have significant operational and potentially regulatory consequences if a breach or incident occurs due to known weaknesses. Implementing immediate, untested patches without a proper risk assessment is also professionally unsound. While seemingly proactive, this approach can introduce instability, cause unexpected system behavior, or even exacerbate existing problems. It bypasses the critical step of understanding the potential impact of changes on the production environment, leading to a higher risk of disruption and potential data integrity issues. This lack of foresight can be seen as a failure in change management and risk mitigation. Focusing solely on performance improvements without addressing security vulnerabilities is a misallocation of priorities. While performance is important, security risks, especially those that could lead to data compromise or system unavailability, typically represent a higher level of threat. This approach neglects the fundamental responsibility to secure the monitored environment, leaving it exposed to potential attacks or failures that could have far more severe consequences than minor performance degradations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first establishing a clear understanding of the identified vulnerabilities and their potential impact. This involves consulting IBM security advisories and Tivoli monitoring documentation. The next step is to conduct a formal risk assessment, categorizing vulnerabilities by severity and likelihood of exploitation. This assessment should consider the criticality of the systems being monitored and the sensitivity of the data being collected. Based on the risk assessment, a prioritized remediation plan should be developed, which may include applying vendor-supplied patches, implementing configuration changes, or developing workarounds. This plan should be reviewed and approved by relevant stakeholders, and any changes should be implemented following a defined change management process, including thorough testing, in a non-production environment, continuous monitoring and reassessment of risks are essential to maintain a secure and stable IT environment. Question 16. Performance analysis shows that several critical IBM Tivoli monitoring V6 3 agents are experiencing high CPU utilization, impacting the overall responsiveness of the monitoring infrastructure. The administrator is considering several immediate actions to alleviate this, which approach best balances performance improvement with the need for responsible system administration and adherence to operational guidelines. Option A. Immediately restart all affected Tivoli monitoring agents to clear their current processes and free up CPU resources. Option B. Disable non-essential Tivoli monitoring agents to reduce the overall load on the Tivoli monitoring server, even if those agents are collecting data deemed important for compliance reporting. Option C. Implement aggressive garbage collection tuning on the Tivoli monitoring server and agents without prior testing or analysis of the impact on data collection. Option D. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the high CPU utilization, including reviewing agent logs, system resource metrics, and potential configuration issues, before proposing and testing targeted solutions. The correct answer is A. Immediately restart all affected Tivoli monitoring agents to clear their current processes and free up CPU resources. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing performance optimization with the potential for unintended consequences that could impact security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with performance tuning, without a thorough understanding of the underlying system dependencies and regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any changes made to improve performance do not inadvertently create vulnerabilities or violate established compliance mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and risk-aware methodology. By conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that considers the impact on security, compliance, and overall system stability, the administrator ensures that performance tuning is undertaken responsibly. This aligns with the principles of good governance and due diligence, which are implicitly expected in any IT administration role, especially when dealing with systems that may handle sensitive data or are subject to specific operational standards. Focus on understanding dependencies and potential compliance implications before making changes is a proactive measure that prevents future issues. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate performance gains without considering broader implications is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to regulatory or ethical failures by potentially compromising data security, which is a fundamental ethical obligation and often a regulatory requirement. For example, if performance tuning inadvertently opens up new network access points or weakens existing security controls, it could violate data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes without proper documentation or rollback plans demonstrates a lack of professional rigor. This failure to maintain an audit trail and have contingency measures in place can lead to significant compliance issues if an incident occurs. As it hinders investigation and remediation efforts, it also shows a disregard for operational best practices that ensure system resilience and accountability. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to change management. This includes 1. Clearly defining the problem or objective, e.g., performance improvement. 2. Identifying all potential solutions, 3 for each solution. Conducting a thorough risk assessment that considers technical feasibility, security implications, compliance requirements, and operational impact. 4. Developing a detailed implementation plan that includes testing, rollback procedures, and communication protocols. And 5. Obtaining necessary approvals before proceeding with any changes. Post-implementation monitoring and review are also crucial to validate the effectiveness of the changes and identify any unforeseen issues. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the risk posture of the IBM Tivoli monitoring V6.3 environment, considering the operational criticality of the production systems, which approach to risk assessment best balances thoroughness with minimal disruption. Option A. Implement a phased rollout of selected monitoring and vulnerability assessment tools, starting with a pilot group of non-critical servers, followed by gradual expansion based on performance and effectiveness feedback. Option B. Immediately deploy a comprehensive suite of monitoring and vulnerability scanning tools across all production servers to ensure complete coverage from the outset. Option C. Rely exclusively on user-reported issues and anecdotal evidence to identify potential risks within the Tivoli monitoring environment. Option D. Temporarily disable certain security monitoring features and reduce alert thresholds to expedite the risk assessment process. Correct answer is A. Implement a phased rollout of selected monitoring and vulnerability assessment tools, starting with a pilot group of non-critical servers, followed by gradual expansion based on performance and effectiveness feedback. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of a live production environment. The administrator must identify potential vulnerabilities without disrupting critical business operations or introducing new risks through the assessment process itself. Careful judgment is required to select methods that are both effective and minimally intrusive. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased and controlled implementation of risk assessment tools. By starting with a pilot deployment and then expanding, the administrator can validate the effectiveness of the chosen tools and methodologies in a controlled manner. This aligns with the principles of responsible system administration and IT governance, which emphasize minimizing disruption and ensuring the integrity of production systems. Furthermore, this approach allows for iterative refinement of the risk assessment process based on early findings, leading to more accurate and actionable insights. This proactive and measured strategy is crucial for maintaining system stability and security. An incorrect approach that involves immediately deploying a comprehensive suite of monitoring and vulnerability scanning tools across all production systems without prior testing or phased rollout is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to significant performance degradation, system instability, or even outages, directly impacting business operations. Such an action would violate the implicit ethical obligation to maintain system availability and could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in system management. It also bypasses the opportunity to learn and adapt the assessment strategy, potentially leading to wasted resources and ineffective risk identification. Another incorrect approach, which is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence and user reports for risk assessment, is also professionally unacceptable. While user feedback is valuable, it is inherently subjective and often incomplete. It fails to provide a systematic and objective evaluation of the system's security posture. This approach neglects the proactive identification of latent vulnerabilities that may not yet be apparent to users, but could be exploited by attackers. It represents a reactive rather than a proactive stance on risk management, which is a fundamental failure in professional IT administration. Finally, an incorrect approach that involves disabling security features or reducing monitoring levels to speed up the risk assessment process is critically flawed. This directly compromises the very systems the administrator is tasked with protecting. It introduces significant security vulnerabilities and increases the likelihood of a successful attack during the assessment period. This action would be a clear breach of professional responsibility and could have severe legal and financial repercussions for the organization. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes defining the scope and objectives of the assessment, identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluating the likelihood and impact of those threats, and determining appropriate mitigation strategies. Crucially, it involves selecting assessment tools and methodologies that are appropriate for the environment, considering their potential impact on production systems. A phased implementation, pilot testing, and continuous monitoring of the assessment process itself are essential components of this framework. Question 18. Analysis of a newly identified vulnerability in IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3, which could potentially allow unauthorized access to sensitive performance data, requires a strategic response. The administrator must decide on the most appropriate course of action to mitigate this risk. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional risk management practices for this situation? Option A. Prioritize patching only those Tivoli monitoring components that are directly exposed to external networks, as internal threats are considered less significant. Option B. Document the vulnerability and monitor for any signs of exploitation, deferring any remediation efforts until a security incident actually occurs. Option C. Immediately apply the latest available patch for IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. To eliminate the vulnerability without further investigation into potential side effects. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the vulnerability impact and likelihood of exploitation. Then select the most appropriate mitigation strategy based on the assessed risk level and operational considerations. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the vulnerability impact and likelihood of exploitation. Then select the most appropriate mitigation strategy based on the assessed risk level and operational considerations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the practical realities of system performance and resource constraints. The administrator must assess the risk associated with a potential vulnerability in IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Without disrupting critical business operations. The challenge lies in accurately quantifying the risk, understanding the potential impact of the vulnerability, and selecting a mitigation strategy that is both effective and minimally disruptive. This requires a deep understanding of the Tivoli monitoring environment, the specific vulnerability, and the organization's risk tolerance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment process. This begins with identifying the specific vulnerability and understanding its potential impact on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the monitored systems. It then involves evaluating the likelihood of the vulnerability being exploited. Based on this assessment, a risk level is determined. The next step is to identify and evaluate potential mitigation strategies, such as applying a patch, implementing a workaround, or reconfiguring monitoring agents. The chosen strategy should align with the organization's security policies and risk appetite, aiming to reduce the risk to an acceptable level with the least possible operational impact. This aligns with best practices in IT risk management, which emphasize a proactive and informed approach to security threats. Incorrect approach is analysis. Ignoring the vulnerability entirely represents a failure to adhere to basic security principles and potentially regulatory requirements for maintaining system integrity and availability. This approach demonstrates a disregard for potential threats and a lack of due diligence, which could lead to significant security breaches and operational disruptions. Implementing a patch immediately, without assessing its impact on system performance or compatibility with other Tivoli components, is a reactive and potentially damaging approach. This can lead to unintended consequences, such as system instability, performance degradation, or even complete service outages, creating new risks that may outweigh the initial vulnerability. This approach bypasses critical testing and validation, steps essential for maintaining a stable IT environment. Focusing solely on the cost of implementing a fix without considering the potential cost of a security incident is a flawed economic and risk management perspective. This approach prioritizes short-term cost savings over long-term security and business continuity, failing to account for the potential financial and reputational damage that a successful exploit could cause. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the total cost of ownership and risk exposure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by following a structured methodology. This involves 1. Identification. Clearly define the asset Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. And the potential threat, the specific vulnerability. 2. Analysis. Understand the vulnerability technical details, its potential impact, and the likelihood of exploitation. 3. Evaluation. Determine the overall risk level by combining impact and likelihood. 4. Treatment. Select and implement appropriate mitigation strategies, considering effectiveness, cost, and operational impact. 5. Monitoring and review. Continuously monitor the effectiveness of implemented controls and reassess risks as the threat landscape evolves. This systematic process ensures that decisions are data-driven, aligned with business objectives, and compliant with relevant security standards and regulations. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that the current risk assessment process for the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6 3 environment may not adequately address potential vulnerabilities in the aggregation and reporting of sensitive system metrics. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a comprehensive and compliant risk assessment for this scenario? Option A. Prioritize the immediate deployment of new ITM agents to expand monitoring coverage. deferring any in-depth risk assessment until after the expansion is complete and operational. Option B. Implement a broad set of general IT security best practices across all IT infrastructure, without specific analysis of the unique components and data flows within the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Deployment. Option C. Focus primarily on optimizing the performance of ITM agents to ensure efficient data collection, assuming that robust network security measures already in place will mitigate any inherent risks within the monitoring system itself. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Architecture, including agents, the Tivoli Enterprise Portal, the Tivoli Enterprise Console, and the Tivoli Data Warehouse, to identify potential data exposure points and unauthorized access vectors, cross-referencing findings with relevant data protection regulations. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3. Architecture, including agents, the Tivoli Enterprise Portal, the Tivoli Enterprise Console, and the Tivoli Data Warehouse, to identify potential data exposure points and unauthorized access vectors, cross-referencing findings with relevant data protection regulations. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the risk assessment process for IBM Tivoli monitoring ITM v6. 3. Deployments. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with robust security and compliance. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating risks associated with monitoring sensitive data without introducing undue complexity or performance degradation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the risk assessment is comprehensive, actionable, and aligned with the organization's overall risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The correct approach, which involves a systematic review of ITM v6, 3 components, data flows and access controls against established security policies and regulatory requirements, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of proactive risk management, ensuring that potential vulnerabilities are identified and addressed before they can be exploited. By focusing on the specific ITM v6, 3 environment, this approach ensures that the risk assessment is relevant and effective. This is crucial for maintaining the integrity and confidentiality of monitored data, which is often subject to strict regulatory oversight. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on agent deployment without considering the central server's security posture fails to address a critical component of the ITM architecture. This oversight could leave the entire monitoring infrastructure vulnerable, as the central server aggregates and stores sensitive data. Such an approach would be a regulatory failure if it leads to a breach of data confidentiality or integrity, violating principles of data protection and potentially specific industry regulations that mandate secure handling of monitored information. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes performance optimization over security risk identification would be professionally unacceptable. While performance is important, neglecting security risks can lead to severe consequences, including data breaches, system compromise, and significant financial and reputational damage. This would represent an ethical failure to protect organizational assets and data, and a regulatory failure if it results in non-compliance with data security mandates. A third incorrect approach that relies on generic IT security best practices without tailoring them to the specific context of IBM Tivoli monitoring v6. 3 would be insufficient. ITM has unique architectural components and potential vulnerabilities that require specialized consideration. Generic advice may overlook critical risks specific to the ITM platform, leading to an incomplete and ineffective risk assessment. This could result in a regulatory failure if the organization cannot demonstrate due diligence in securing its monitoring infrastructure as required by relevant compliance frameworks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes identifying assets, ITM components, data, identifying threats, unauthorized access, data leakage, analyzing vulnerabilities, configuration weaknesses, access control gaps, assessing the likelihood and impact of risks, and developing mitigation strategies. Professionals should consult relevant ITM documentation, security advisories, and applicable regulatory guidelines to ensure a thorough and compliant risk assessment. Continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment are also vital to adapt to evolving threats and system changes. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that the IBM Tivoli monitoring V6.3 environment is generating a high volume of alerts, many of which are not immediately actionable or appear to be repetitive for minor, non-critical events. The operations team is experiencing alert fatigue, potentially delaying responses to critical incidents. What is the most effective and professionally responsible approach to address this situation? Option A. Deploy several new, complex monitoring agents and alert rules that promise more granular data, without a comprehensive prior testing or validation phase. Option B. Continue to operate with the current alert configuration, assuming the high volume is a necessary byproduct of comprehensive monitoring, and focus on improving the team's ability to filter through the noise. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of alert definitions, thresholds, and correlation rules with an IBM Tivoli monitoring V6. 3. Analyze historical alert data to identify patterns of false positives and non-critical recurring events. Based on this analysis, systematically tune thresholds, suppress known benign events, and refine alert correlation to reduce noise while ensuring critical issues remain visible. Option D. Immediately disable a significant portion of the less critical alert categories to reduce the immediate volume of incoming notifications. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of alert definitions, thresholds, and correlation rules with an IBM Tivoli monitoring V6. 3. Analyze historical alert data to identify patterns of false positives and non-critical recurring events. Based on this analysis, systematically tune thresholds, suppress known benign events, and refine alert correlation to reduce noise while ensuring critical issues remain visible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT operations, balancing the need for proactive monitoring with the potential for alert fatigue and resource strain. The administrator must evaluate the effectiveness of existing monitoring configurations and determine if adjustments are necessary to maintain optimal system health and operational efficiency. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the perceived ineffectiveness without disrupting critical monitoring functions or introducing new vulnerabilities. This requires a deep understanding of IBM Tivoli monitoring V6.3's capabilities, best practices for alert tuning, and the potential impact of configuration changes on system performance and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven evaluation of the current monitoring configuration. This begins with analyzing the types and frequency of alerts generated by IBM Tivoli monitoring V6.3. The administrator should investigate whether alerts are actionable, if they represent genuine issues, or if they are indicative of misconfiguration or overly sensitive thresholds. This process aligns with best practices for IT service management (ITSM) and operational excellence, which emphasize continuous improvement and the optimization of monitoring tools. By focusing on alert correlation, root cause analysis of frequent, non-critical alerts, and judicious threshold tuning, the administrator ensures that the monitoring system provides valuable insights without overwhelming operations staff. This proactive tuning reduces noise, improves response times to critical incidents, and ultimately enhances system reliability and availability, which are often implicit requirements in regulatory frameworks governing IT operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling alerts without proper analysis is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the principle of maintaining adequate oversight and control over IT systems. Such an action could lead to undetected security breaches or performance degradations, violating compliance mandates that require timely detection and remediation of issues. Implementing new, untested monitoring agents or complex alert rules without a phased rollout and validation poses a risk of introducing instability or performance degradation. This can lead to system outages or data integrity issues, potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory requirements for system availability and data protection. Ignoring the volume of alerts and continuing with the status quo represents a failure to adhere to best practices for operational efficiency and continuous improvement. This can lead to missed critical alerts due to alert fatigue, increasing the risk of security incidents or service disruptions, which could have regulatory implications, depending on the industry and data involved. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach monitoring configuration by first establishing clear objectives for the monitoring system. This involves understanding what constitutes a critical event, what level of detail is required, and what the acceptable thresholds are for various metrics. A data-driven approach, involving the analysis of historical alert data, is paramount. This analysis should focus on identifying patterns, such as recurring non-critical alerts, false positives, or alert storms. Based on this analysis, a phased approach to tuning thresholds, suppressing known benign events, and potentially refining alert correlation rules should be implemented. Regular review and validation of these changes are essential to ensure ongoing effectiveness and to adapt to evolving system behavior and business requirements. This iterative process ensures that the monitoring system remains a valuable tool for maintaining system health and compliance, rather than a source of operational overhead.